My name is Roy, and at 34 years old, I have a secret that only a select few know. Behind my ordinary appearance lies the truth of my $15 million tech empire that I built from nothing. I never wanted my family to know, especially my sister Amanda, who spent years calling me a nobody. But at her engagement dinner, everything changed when her fiancé decided to Google my name. The shocked expression on her face when she saw my net worth flash across his screen is something I will never forget. If you are watching this from a family gathering where you feel undervalued, drop your location in the comments and hit subscribe to see how I finally got my sweet, silent revenge. Growing up in a middle-class neighborhood in Seattle, Amanda and I were actually close as kids. We would spend hours building forts in the backyard, inventing games that only we understood, and defending each other from the neighborhood bullies. Those were simpler times, before grades and achievements became the currency of approval in our household. Our parents were good people with traditional values. Dad worked as an accountant at a respected firm downtown, and Mom taught high school mathematics. They believed in a clear path to success. Get good grades, earn prestigious degrees, land corporate jobs with benefits, and climb the ladder methodically. This formula had worked for them, and they expected nothing less from their children. The trouble began around middle school. While Amanda excelled in every subject, bringing home perfect report cards that earned prime placement on the refrigerator, I struggled to focus in class. My mind would wander during lectures, and homework felt like torture. "Why can you not just apply yourself like your sister?" became my dad's favorite question at dinner. What none of us knew then was that I was dealing with undiagnosed ADHD. The structured environment of traditional education was essentially designed to highlight my weaknesses rather than my strengths. By the time I turned 15, I had discovered my passion for technology and entrepreneurship. While other kids were playing video games, I was learning how to code and dreaming of creating software that would change the world. I built my first rudimentary app that helped local businesses manage their inventory. It was clunky and basic, but I was proud of it. "That is nice, Roy," Mom would say with a distracted smile when I tried to show her how it worked. "But do not let it interfere with your schoolwork. That is what really matters." Meanwhile, Amanda became the golden child. Her straight A's, position as class president, and acceptance into all the honor societies made her the pride of our parents. At family gatherings, relatives would ask about Amanda first, gushing over her accomplishments while offering me sympathetic smiles and generic questions about how school was going. "Amanda is heading for greatness," my father announced proudly at her high school graduation dinner. "Full scholarship to Stanford, following in the footsteps of real success." I sat quietly, picking at my food while Amanda basked in the praise. Later that night, she found me in the backyard, staring up at the stars. "Do not worry, little brother," she said, her tone dripping with condescension despite being only 2 years older. "Not everyone can be an achiever. The world needs average people too." That summer, I worked tirelessly on developing my coding skills. When college application season arrived, I got into a decent state university, but nothing comparable to Amanda's prestigious path. My parents made their disappointment clear. "We just want what is best for you," Mom said. "We want you to have security and respect." 2 semesters into college, I knew I was on the wrong path. The structured curriculum felt suffocating, and all I could think about were my own projects and ideas. When I told my parents I wanted to drop out and pursue my tech startup dream, the kitchen erupted in chaos. "Absolutely not," Dad slammed his fist on the table. "No son of mine is going to throw away his education to chase some fantasy." Amanda, home for spring break from Stanford, shook her head. This is so typical Roy. Always looking for the easy way out. Building a company from scratch is not the easy way out, I argued. Playing with computers is not a career plan, she shot back. It is a hobby. Despite their objections, I made my decision. The night before I left home, Amanda came to my room. "You are making a huge mistake," she said, leaning against my doorframe. "You know that, right? You will never be successful without a degree. Not everyone has what it takes to make it in the real world." I zipped up my backpack and looked her straight in the eyes. "Watch me." That night I made a promise to myself. I would succeed on my own terms, without their support or approval. And when I did, I would not come running back for validation. My success would be mine alone, built with my own hands and vision. What I did not know then was how this decision would set in motion years of family tension that would culminate in one unforgettable dinner. With $2,000 saved from summer jobs and a backpack full of clothes, I boarded a bus to San Francisco. The tech capital of the world seemed like the perfect place to turn my dreams into reality, though I had no idea how difficult the journey would be. My first apartment was actually just a corner of a living room in a tiny flat shared with 3 other aspiring entrepreneurs. We hung sheets for privacy and took turns sleeping on the single couch when backs became too sore from the floor mats. Despite the cramped quarters, there was an electric energy among us, each person coding, planning, and dreaming 18 hours a day. "We are going to change the world," my roommate would say at 3 in the morning, eyes bloodshot from staring at screens all day. I threw myself into building my first real startup, a platform that would connect small businesses with local customers through targeted promotions. For 8 months, I worked tirelessly, surviving on ramen noodles and the cheapest coffee I could find. I called my parents once a month, giving vague updates about making progress, while Amanda completed her junior year at Stanford with perfect grades. Then reality hit hard. My startup failed. The platform could not attract enough users to become viable, and my small pool of money dried up completely. "Maybe this is a sign," Mom suggested gently during our monthly call. "You could re-enroll for the fall semester. Amanda has been accepted into a summer internship program at Goldman Sachs," Dad added pointedly. I almost gave up. Standing in a convenience store with exactly $4.27 left to my name, I seriously considered calling home and admitting defeat. That was when I met Jackson. He was a veteran entrepreneur in his 50s who happened to be buying coffee at the same time. When the cashier told me I was 13 cents short for my energy drink, Jackson covered it. Something about my defeated expression must have spoken to him. "Bad day?" he asked as we walked out. "Bad year," I replied honestly. Over that energy drink, I explained my failed startup and dwindling options. Instead of offering sympathy, Jackson offered opportunity. His venture capital firm was looking for a technical consultant to evaluate potential investments in the software space. "You clearly know how to build," he said, "even if your first attempt did not succeed. That is valuable." The consulting gig paid enough to move into a slightly better apartment with only one roommate. More importantly, it connected me with mentors and investors who saw potential in my ideas and work ethic. Jackson became not just my boss but a mentor who believed in me when no one else did. "Your problem was not the code," he told me after reviewing my failed startup. "It was the business model. You built something cool, but not something people would pay for." Big difference. With Jackson's guidance, I began developing a new project. Software that would revolutionize supply chain management for mid-sized companies. By identifying inefficiencies and automating decisions, My platform could save businesses millions in operational costs. "This has potential," Jackson said when I showed him the prototype. Real potential. After 6 months of development, we presented to a small group of angel investors. I was nervous, wearing the only button-up shirt I owned, freshly ironed. "The supply chain management space is crowded," one investor said skeptically. "What makes your solution different?" I took a deep breath and explained how my software used machine learning algorithms to predict disruptions before they occurred, allowing companies to adapt proactively rather than reactively. By the end of the meeting, we had secured $750,000 in seed funding. While my company grew steadily over the next 4 years, I maintained a low profile. No flashy press releases, no social media bragging, no industry parties. I wanted the product to speak for itself, and it did. We expanded from 3 employees to 30, then to over 100. Revenue increased exponentially as more businesses adopted our platform. Throughout this period, I kept details of my success from my family. During holiday visits, I would drive a modest rental car and wear simple clothes. When asked about work, I gave truthful but understated answers. "Business is going well," I would say. "We are making progress." Meanwhile, Amanda completed her MBA and landed a prestigious position at a consulting firm. Each family gathering became a showcase for her achievements, with my parents beaming with pride. Amanda just closed a deal with a Fortune 500 company, Dad would announce to anyone who would listen. I did not mind. In fact, I preferred it this way. My success was my own, not defined by their approval or understanding. I found peace in building something meaningful while living simply despite my growing net worth. Then came the email that would change everything. Amanda was engaged to Bradford, a banking executive she had met through work. The wedding would be next spring, and there would be an engagement dinner in 2 months. The message ended with a personal note from my sister. "Hope you can make it, Roy. Wear something nice if possible. Bradford's family is very well connected, and I want to make a good impression. Maybe borrow a suit." The condescension in her words was subtle but unmistakable. After all these years, she still saw me as the family disappointment, someone who needed instruction on how to dress properly for important occasions. Little did she know that my company had just been valued at over $100 million, with my personal stake worth $15 million. As I booked my flight back to Seattle for the engagement dinner, I had no intention of revealing my wealth. This visit would be like all the others. Understated, humble, focused on family rather than finances. But fate, it seems, had other plans. The holidays arrived before the engagement dinner, giving me a preview of what to expect. I flew back to Seattle, rented a modest Toyota, and arrived at my parents' home with a small suitcase and carefully chosen gifts. "Roy," Mom hugged me at the door, her smile genuine but her eyes quickly moving past me to check if I had brought anyone along. "Just you again this year." "Just me," I confirmed, used to the implication that at 34 I should have settled down by now. The house was already decorated for the occasion, with photos of Amanda and Bradford prominently displayed on the mantel. I recognized my sister immediately when she emerged from the kitchen, wearing an expensive-looking cashmere sweater and sporting a diamond ring that caught the light dramatically with every gesture. "Roy, you made it," she air-kissed near my cheek, careful not to make actual contact. "Have you lost weight? You look different." "Just been busy with work," I said, placing my gifts under the tree. "Bradford should be here soon," she continued, barely acknowledging my response. "He had an important client meeting this morning. His team manages portfolios for some very influential people." Over the next hour, I listened as Amanda detailed Bradford's career accomplishments, his family connections, and their plans for an extravagant destination wedding. My parents hung on every word, asking questions that gave her more opportunities to boast. When Bradford finally arrived, the family dynamic shifted even further. He entered with the confident air of someone who had never questioned his place in the world, greeting my parents warmly before offering me a firm handshake. "So you are the brother," he said, sizing me up. "Amanda tells me you work with computers." Before I could answer, Amanda jumped in. "Roy has a little startup thing. Nothing like your firm, of course." The dinner conversation revolved entirely around Amanda and Bradford's world. The luxury condo they had purchased, their planned honeymoon to the Maldives, the connections Bradford's family could offer. Whenever the conversation veered toward my life, Amanda quickly redirected. "Enough about Roy's little projects," she would say with a dismissive wave. "Dad, did I tell you about the charity gala Bradford's company is hosting?" After dinner, while helping Mom with the dishes, I overheard Amanda talking to Bradford in the living room. "My brother has always been the family disappointment," she said in a hushed tone that still carried to the kitchen. "Dropped out of college, no real career path. It is sweet that he tries, but some people just are not cut out for success." My hands tightened around the plate I was drying. After all these years, nothing had changed. In her eyes, I would always be the failure, the cautionary tale, the brother who could not measure up. Later that night, Dad cornered me in the hallway, a concerned expression on his face. "Son, I know you think you are doing fine with this startup business, but have you considered Bradford might be able to help you find a real position? Something stable with benefits." "My business is doing well, Dad," I said carefully. "I do not need help." He patted my shoulder condescendingly. "Of course you would say that. Pride is important. But there is no shame in accepting help when you are struggling." I almost told him then. The words were on the tip of my tongue. "Dad, my company was valued at $100 million last month, but something held me back." Would it really change anything? Would sudden respect based on my bank account be any more meaningful than their years of dismissal? The next morning, while having coffee alone in the kitchen, Amanda joined me with wedding magazines in hand. "So the engagement dinner is going to be at Cascade, that new 5-star restaurant downtown," she announced without preamble. "Bradford's entire family will be there, including his father who sits on the board of 3 major banks." "Sounds impressive," I said, sipping my coffee. "It is important that everything goes perfectly," she continued, flipping through a magazine. "Bradford's family has certain expectations. I have told them all about us, of course." "What exactly have you told them about me?" I asked, curious about how she had framed my existence. Amanda looked up, slightly flustered. "Oh, just that you are my younger brother who is still finding his path. That you are creative and interested in technology. That is one way to put it." "Look, Roy," she said, closing the magazine. "Bradford's family values achievement, status, education. Things that are important in the real world. I just do not want you to feel uncomfortable when they start asking questions about your career and accomplishments." The implication was clear. She was embarrassed by me and worried I would somehow diminish her in the eyes of her future in-laws. For a moment, I considered not attending the dinner at all. But something inside me wanted to see this through, to sit at that table and face whatever came next. "I will be there," I promised. "And do not worry about me feeling uncomfortable. I know exactly who I am." Amanda smiled, relieved but clearly missing my meaning. "Great. Just remember to wear a proper suit. First impressions matter to these people." As the holidays ended, and I returned to San Francisco, I found myself thinking more and more about the upcoming engagement dinner. For years, I had maintained my privacy, separating my personal success from family dynamics. But as the date approached, I wondered if it was finally time for the truth to come out, not by my revelation, but through whatever twist of fate might be waiting at that dinner table. 2 months later, I found myself standing outside Cascade, Seattle's newest and most exclusive restaurant. Through the windows, I could see crystal chandeliers and waitstaff in crisp uniforms navigating between tables of well-dressed patrons. Taking a deep breath, I adjusted the cuffs of my shirt and entered. Despite Amanda's concerns about my wardrobe, I had chosen to wear what made me comfortable. A simple but well-made button-down shirt, quality dark jeans, and a casual blazer. No tie, no pretension. I knew it would disappoint her, but I had long since stopped dressing to meet others' expectations. "Reservation name?" the hostess asked. "Should be under Bradford Williams," I replied. Her demeanor changed instantly. "Ah yes, the Williams engagement dinner. The rest of the party has already arrived. Please follow me." She led me through the restaurant to a private room in the back. As the door opened, all eyes turned to assess the newcomer. Amanda's face fell slightly when she saw my attire, but she quickly recovered, rising to greet me with a practiced smile. "Roy," finally, she said, guiding me into the room. "Everyone, this is my younger brother." Bradford stood to shake my hand, his grip unnecessarily firm. "Glad you could make it." The table was arranged with obvious thought to hierarchy. Bradford and Amanda sat at the center, with his parents in positions of honor beside them. Bradford's siblings and their spouses occupied the next tier of importance, while I had been placed at the far end, next to an empty chair that I assumed was for a late arrival. "Roy, these are Bradford's parents, Judge Williams and Dr. Williams," Amanda introduced, her voice taking on a reverent quality I had never heard before. Judge Williams, a stern-faced man with silver hair, gave me a cursory nod. "Banking or law?" he asked without preamble. "Neither, sir," I replied. "I work in technology." "Technology," he repeated flatly, as if I had said I collected bottle caps for a living. Amanda jumped in quickly. "Roy is still finding his way professionally. Bradford, did you tell your father about the new partnership your firm is exploring?" And just like that, I was dismissed from the conversation. As appetizers were served, I observed the dynamics around the table. Bradford's family exuded old money confidence, from their subtle designer clothing to their casual mentions of vacation homes and boarding schools. They spoke about money without ever mentioning actual amounts, a sign of those who have always had enough not to count. When the waiter asked for my order, Amanda interrupted before I could speak. "He will have the chicken," she said, then turned to explain to Bradford's mother. "Roy is not really adventurous with food. I had been planning to order the sea bass, but let it go." This pattern continued throughout the appetizer course. Whenever I began to speak, Amanda would interject or redirect the conversation. When Bradford's sister asked what part of tech I worked in, Amanda answered for me. "Oh, he does some computer programming thing. Nothing serious, not like the tech executives in your circle." As the main course arrived, Bradford's father directed his attention toward me again, this time with the air of a man doing a charitable deed by acknowledging my existence. "So what exactly does your startup do?" he asked, cutting into his steak. "We develop supply chain management software," I answered simply. "Supply chain," he repeated, clearly unimpressed. "And how many employees do you have?" Before I could answer, Amanda laughed lightly. "Dad, Roy works for a startup, not runs one." "Right, Roy." I looked at my sister, seeing the slight panic in her eyes. She truly believed I was some low-level programmer struggling to make ends meet. Actually, I began, but Bradford's mother interrupted with a question about wedding flowers, and Amanda gratefully changed the subject. As dinner progressed, the conversation turned to status symbols. Bradford's recent promotion, the couple's plans to buy in an exclusive neighborhood, their connections to Seattle's elite. With each topic, the divide between their world and what they assumed was mine grew wider. "We are thinking of the Livingston district for our next home," Bradford announced. "The property values keep increasing, which makes it a solid investment." "Smart move," his father approved. "Real estate in the right neighborhoods is how wealth is maintained." "Roy just renewed the lease on his apartment," Amanda added, though I had never told her anything about my living situation. "Right, Roy." I took a sip of water and nodded noncommittally. In truth, I owned a comfortable but modest condo in San Francisco and a small cabin in the mountains for weekend retreats. But correcting her seemed pointless. Bradford's sister, who seemed less concerned with status than the rest of her family, tried again to include me. "What do you enjoy doing outside of work, Roy?" It was a simple, friendly question, but Amanda jumped in yet again. "Roy is really into video games, right? All those computer people are." "Actually, I enjoy hiking and sailing," I said firmly, speaking over her attempt to paint me as a stereotypical tech nerd. "I have a small sailboat that I take out on weekends." This piece of true information clearly surprised Amanda. "Since when do you sail?" "About 5 years now," I replied calmly. For a brief moment, confusion crossed her face as she realized there might be parts of my life she knew nothing about. But the moment passed quickly, as Bradford's father steered the conversation back to what he considered important matters. "Bradford tells me you have no formal education beyond high school," he said, not bothering to disguise his disapproval. "Did you ever consider completing your degree?" The table grew quiet, the question hanging in the air like a challenge. "I found that practical experience was more valuable in my field," I answered evenly. He shook his head. "In my experience, those without proper credentials rarely advance beyond a certain point. Education separates the achievers from the dreamers." Amanda nodded in agreement. "That is what I always tell him." The dinner continued in this vein, with subtle and not-so-subtle digs at my perceived lack of achievement. Each time I began to speak about my work, Amanda would interrupt or downplay whatever I said. It became increasingly clear that she had built her identity around being the successful sibling, the one who had followed the proper path to achievement. The thought that I might not fit her narrative was threatening to her in ways I had not fully understood until that night. As dessert was served, Bradford's father raised his glass in a toast. "To Amanda and Bradford, a perfect match in every way. Both ambitious, successful, and destined for greatness." Everyone clinked glasses. I participated politely, watching my sister bask in the approval she had always craved. For a moment, I felt a pang of sadness for her, wondering if she would ever find happiness that did not depend on external validation. The breaking point came unexpectedly, as Bradford's mother asked about wedding costs and who would be contributing what. "Roy will not be contributing financially," Amanda said quickly. "We would never expect that, given his situation." "Of course not," Bradford's mother said with a thin smile. "Family participates as they are able." Something in her tone, the dismissive charity of it, finally ignited a spark of anger in me. For years, I had let Amanda's narrative about me stand unchallenged. I had accepted the role of underachieving brother because it seemed easier than confronting the complex feelings that truth would bring. But sitting at that table, being discussed as if I were an unfortunate burden rather than a successful entrepreneur in my own right, I felt my patience wearing thin. "We would not want to put any strain on your resources," Amanda added, patting my hand condescendingly. "Your presence is gift enough." I withdrew my hand and was about to respond when Amanda delivered the final blow. "Besides," she said with a laugh that was meant to sound lighthearted but came across as cruel, "Roy is just jealous because he will always be a nobody. Not everyone can be successful, right?" The table fell uncomfortably silent. Even Bradford looked embarrassed by her comment. And that is when everything changed. The awkward silence following Amanda's "nobody" comment stretched just long enough to be uncomfortable before Bradford's mother attempted to smooth things over. "I am sure your brother is very accomplished in his own way, dear," she said, though her tone suggested she was merely being polite. "Oh, of course," Amanda backpedaled slightly, realizing she had crossed a line in front of her future in-laws. "I just meant that we all have different definitions of success." Bradford cleared his throat and turned to me with what seemed like genuine curiosity. "What is the name of your software company again, Roy?" "Something Tech. Nexus Supply Systems," I answered, taking another sip of water. Amanda rolled her eyes subtly. "It is just a small startup thing he works at." Bradford's father, who had been largely dismissive of me throughout the evening, suddenly perked up slightly. "Supply chain software, you said. Is that business to business?" "Yes, we focus on mid to large-sized companies primarily," I explained. "Our platform helps identify inefficiencies and automate logistics decisions." "Fascinating," he replied in a tone that suggested it was anything but. "And what position do you hold there?" "Developer." Before I could answer, Amanda jumped in again. "Roy does coding. Very technical stuff that none of us would understand." Bradford's sister, who had been the most genuinely friendly person at the table, asked, "How long have you been with this company?" "From the beginning," I said simply. "Roy was one of the first employees," Amanda explained, again incorrectly. "He has been there about 4 years now, right?" I nodded, not bothering to correct her assumption that I was an employee rather than the founder. The pattern was clear. Every time I shared even the smallest detail about my work, Amanda would immediately reframe it to fit her narrative of my underachievement. As dessert was served, the conversation shifted to Bradford and Amanda's extravagant wedding and honeymoon plans. "We have booked the entire resort for 3 days," Bradford explained, describing a luxury property in Hawaii. "The privacy is worth the extra expense." "And how long will you be in Bali afterward?" his mother asked. 2 weeks, Amanda replied. Bradford's firm is very understanding about his taking a proper honeymoon. That is the benefit of being in a senior position. She turned to me with false sympathy. "I imagine it must be hard for you to take time off at your job. Startups are not known for work-life balance." "I manage my time well," I said simply. Bradford's father leaned forward, swirling his expensive scotch. "Young man, let me give you some career advice. The tech bubble has burst before and will burst again. You would be wise to consider a more stable industry. Banking, for instance, always weathers economic storms." "I appreciate the suggestion," I replied politely. "Dad has helped so many young people find their footing in real careers," Amanda added, giving me a meaningful look. "Maybe you should listen to his advice, Roy." Bradford, perhaps sensing my growing discomfort, attempted to change the subject. "Roy, Amanda mentioned you were quite good with computers in school. Were you always interested in technology?" It was a genuine question, an opportunity to share something about myself. But before I could answer, Amanda laughed dismissively. "Good with computers is generous. He was always playing video games when he should have been studying." Our parents were constantly on him about his grades. Bradford's mother raised an eyebrow. Not everyone is academically inclined, I suppose. It is not about academic inclination, Amanda continued, warming to her favorite topic. My shortcomings. It is about dedication and hard work. I worked for my success. Nothing was handed to me. The irony of this statement, coming from someone who had received every advantage and encouragement from our parents, was not lost on me. But I remained silent, watching as she continued to build herself up by tearing me down. Roy has always taken the easy path, she told the table, as if sharing an unfortunate but accepted family truth. When college got difficult, he dropped out. When a real job seemed too demanding, he went to work at a startup where he could wear jeans and play ping pong. Bradford looked increasingly uncomfortable with his fiancée's behavior. Amanda, perhaps we should discuss the wedding entertainment options. But Amanda was on a roll now, years of competitive resentment spilling out in front of her future in-laws. You know, when we were growing up, our parents had such high hopes for both of us. I fulfilled those hopes. I did everything right. Roy chose a different path. Different does not mean wrong, I said quietly. She gave me a patronizing smile. Of course not. But let us be honest, your choices have not exactly led to success, have they? When was the last time you could afford a vacation? Or a new car? Meanwhile, Bradford and I are looking at vacation properties in Aspen for weekend getaways. Bradford's sister, who seemed genuinely embarrassed by the conversation, tried again to diffuse the tension. I think it is admirable to follow your passion, regardless of the financial outcome. There is more to life than money. Easy to say when you have money, Amanda countered with a tight smile. Trust me, Roy would trade places with any of us in a heartbeat. I set down my fork, my appetite completely gone. You seem very certain about what I want, Amanda. Oh, please, she scoffed. Are you going to sit there and tell me you are happy living paycheck to paycheck in your tiny apartment, while working endless hours for a company that could fold tomorrow? Bradford's father chuckled. Most of these tech startups do fail, statistically speaking. 90% never turn a profit. See, Amanda gestured triumphantly. Even Judge Williams knows it is a dead-end career. Actually, Bradford's father continued, the ones that succeed can be quite lucrative. I have a colleague whose son got in early at a supply chain software company. Some operation that went from nothing to a major player in just a few years. Made him a fortune. For a brief moment, I wondered if he might be referring to my company, which had received significant coverage in industry publications. But Amanda quickly dismissed the comparison. That is different. Those are the lucky few, the outliers. And they usually have advanced degrees from top universities, not college dropouts. The dinner had become increasingly uncomfortable. Bradford tried several times to steer the conversation away from my perceived failures, but Amanda kept returning to the topic, as if compelled to emphasize the contrast between her choices and mine. As coffee was served, Bradford's mother asked about Amanda's plans to continue working after the wedding. Absolutely, Amanda replied. I have worked too hard to build my career to step back now. Unlike some people, I believe in seeing things through. She cast a meaningful glance in my direction. That was when Bradford, perhaps trying to show interest in my work or simply to change the subject, casually pulled out his phone. What was the name of your company again, Roy? Nexus something. Nexus Supply Systems, I repeated. Amanda sighed dramatically. Bradford, trust me, you have never heard of it. It is a tiny operation. Bradford shrugged, already typing the name into his search engine. I am just curious. My firm handles investments for several tech companies. Maybe there is some overlap. I doubt it, Amanda said dismissively. Roy's company is not exactly in the league of businesses your firm deals with. And that is when it happened. The moment that would change our family dynamic forever. Bradford's expression shifted dramatically as he stared at his phone screen. His eyes widened, and he looked up at me with newfound interest. Nexus Supply Systems, he read aloud. Founded in 2019, current valuation $120 million as of last quarter's funding round. His voice grew increasingly impressed as he continued reading. Clients include Johnson & Johnson, Toyota North America, and Costco Wholesale. The table fell silent. Amanda's smile froze on her face. "Let me see that," she demanded, reaching for Bradford's phone. Bradford handed his phone to Amanda, whose fingers trembled slightly as she took it. The screen displayed a business news article with my company's latest valuation and a list of our high-profile clients. As she scrolled down, her face paled. "This cannot be right," she muttered, continuing to scroll. Then she gasped audibly. There on the screen was my professional headshot beside the title, Founder and CEO. "Is this you?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper as she turned the phone toward me. I nodded once, maintaining my composure. "Yes, that is me." Bradford's father, suddenly very interested, reached for the phone. "May I?" Amanda surrendered the device numbly, her eyes never leaving my face. Judge Williams adjusted his reading glasses and studied the screen with newfound intensity. $120 million valuation, he read aloud, then looked up at me with entirely different eyes. "And you are the founder and CEO?" "Yes, sir," I confirmed. "But," Amanda stammered, "you never said anything. You let us think." "I never corrected your assumptions," I clarified. "There is a difference." Bradford leaned over his father's shoulder to look at the phone again. "It says here you were featured in Forbes 30 Under 30 3 years ago. And, wait, is this right? Your personal net worth is estimated at $15 million. Amanda made a small, strangled sound. The table had transformed in an instant. Where moments before I had been the pitied underachiever, I was now the focus of intense interest and recalculation. Bradford's mother, who had barely acknowledged me all evening, suddenly smiled warmly. "How fascinating, Roy. You must tell us more about your company." Before I could respond, Bradford's father began scrolling through more search results. Nexus secured $20 million in Series C funding last year. Expanded to European markets. Revolutionary AI approach to supply chain optimization. He looked up at me with newfound respect. "Impressive, very impressive." Amanda sat frozen, her dessert untouched, as her carefully constructed narrative about me crumbled before her eyes. Bradford appeared equally shocked but also intrigued, while his family members exchanged meaningful glances across the table. "Why did you not tell us?" Amanda finally managed to ask, her voice a mixture of confusion and accusation. I took a sip of water, considering my words carefully. "You never asked. You always assumed you knew what I was doing and how I was living. It was easier to let you believe what you wanted to believe. But all these years," she pressed, "at family gatherings, holidays. You drove ordinary rental cars, never mentioned your success." "Success is not something I need to broadcast," I replied simply. "I am proud of what I have built, but my worth is not defined by my net worth." Bradford's father, completely transformed in his demeanor toward me, leaned forward eagerly. "Tell me about your expansion strategy. Are you considering going public?" "We are exploring several options," I answered diplomatically. Our focus remains on sustainable growth rather than quick exits. Smart, very smart, he nodded approvingly. I have some contacts in private equity who might be very interested in learning more. Amanda watched this exchange with visible disbelief, as the father who had dismissed me minutes ago now treated me like a valued equal. Bradford's mother, not to be outdone, jumped in as well. You must come to our country club as our guest, she offered warmly. Many of our friends are angel investors, always looking for promising opportunities. Bradford, to his credit, seemed genuinely impressed rather than calculating. This is incredible, Roy. I had no idea. Why keep it so quiet? Before I could answer, Amanda interrupted, her voice tinged with hurt and anger. He kept it quiet to make me look foolish. This whole time, letting me believe he was struggling while secretly being a millionaire. Is this some kind of revenge? Not everything is about you, Amanda, I said quietly. My choices were never made with you in mind. Bradford's sister, who had been the only genuinely kind person at the table all evening, smiled at me. I think it is refreshing to meet someone successful who does not feel the need to boast about it. Exactly, I agreed. I built my company because I believed in the product and the problem it solves, not for status or recognition. Amanda struggled to process this new reality. But all those times I tried to help you, offered you connections, suggested better career paths. I did not need help, I explained gently. I was doing fine on my own terms. Bradford's father, now fully invested in networking with me, pulled out a business card. We should talk further. My firm has extensive connections that might benefit your company. I accepted his card politely, though I had no intention of pursuing the connection. The sudden shift in his attitude, based solely on my financial status, told me everything I needed to know about his character. Amanda stood abruptly, her napkin falling to the floor. "Excuse me for a moment," she mumbled, then hurried toward the restrooms. Bradford looked torn between following her and continuing the conversation with me. "I had no idea," he said again, shaking his head in amazement. "All this time, Amanda talked about you as if I was a disappointment," I finished for him. "I know." His expression turned serious. "Why did you come tonight? If you knew how she was going to treat you, why subject yourself to it?" It was a good question, one I had asked myself many times on the flight to Seattle. "She is still my sister," I answered honestly. "And I wanted to meet the man she has chosen to marry." Bradford nodded slowly, seeming to understand something important about me from that simple statement. After a moment he stood. "I should check on Amanda." "Excuse me." As he left, Bradford's family closed in around me, asking questions about investment opportunities, business strategies, and industry connections. The same people who had barely acknowledged my existence an hour ago now treated me like a prized acquaintance. Their transparent shift in behavior was both amusing and sad. When Amanda returned, her eyes were red-rimmed but her composure restored. Bradford followed closely behind her, his hands supportively on her back. She took her seat without meeting my gaze, while the conversation around us continued to focus on my business achievements. "Roy," Bradford's father said enthusiastically, "you must join us for golf next weekend. I am hosting several bank executives who would be fascinated by your work." Before I could respond, Amanda finally spoke up. "Could we please stop talking about Roy's secret success for 5 minutes? This dinner was supposed to be about our engagement." An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Bradford gently took her hand. "Of course you are right. This is your night." But the dynamic had shifted irrevocably. The carefully orchestrated impression Amanda had planned to create had been disrupted by the truth about me. Even as the conversation returned to wedding plans, the undercurrent had changed. Bradford's family now looked at me with respect and interest, while occasionally giving Amanda assessing glances, as if reevaluating her in light of this new information. As the dinner finally drew to a close, Bradford's father insisted on paying the entire bill despite my offer to contribute. Outside the restaurant, as the valet brought around their luxury vehicles, Amanda pulled me aside. "Why did you not tell me?" she demanded in a harsh whisper. "All these years, letting me believe you were struggling." "Would it have changed anything between us?" I asked genuinely. "Would you have respected me more as a person if you had known I was wealthy?" She had no immediate answer, which was an answer in itself. Bradford approached, placing a gentle hand on Amanda's shoulder. "The driver is here with our car," he told her, then turned to me with newfound respect. "It was truly a pleasure meeting you, Roy. I hope we will have more opportunities to talk in the future." I nodded. "Congratulations again on your engagement." As they walked away, I heard Bradford's father calling after me. "Roy, our club next Saturday. I will have my assistant contact yours with the details." I smiled noncommittally and waved, then turned to the valet to retrieve my modest rental car. As I drove away from the restaurant, I felt strangely lighter, as if a weight I had carried for years had finally been lifted. The truth was out, not by my design but by chance. What would happen next between Amanda and me remained to be seen, but for the first time in years, the possibility of honesty existed between us. My phone buzzed with a text from Bradford. Dinner was eye-opening. Would like to talk more sometime. Amanda has a lot to process. I did not doubt that. As I drove back to my hotel, I wondered how this revelation would affect our relationship going forward. The wall of misconceptions that had stood between us for so long had finally crumbled. What we would build in its place remained to be seen. The morning after the engagement dinner, I checked out of my hotel and headed to the airport earlier than necessary. Part of me wanted to avoid any immediate follow-up conversations with Amanda or Bradford's family. I needed time to process what had happened and what it might mean for our relationship moving forward. As I sat in the airport lounge waiting for my flight back to San Francisco, my phone buzzed with messages. Bradford's father had already connected with me on LinkedIn and sent a message about potential business opportunities. His mother had somehow obtained my email and sent an invitation to their country club. I responded politely but noncommittally to both. The message I was both expecting and dreading did not come until I was already in the air. When I landed and turned off airplane mode, a text from Amanda appeared. "We need to talk. Call me when you can." Instead of calling immediately, I took an Uber home and settled in, making a cup of coffee and sitting on my balcony overlooking the bay. The view always helped me think clearly. Finally, I dialed her number. "Roy," she answered on the first ring, her voice strained. "Last night was—" I do not even know what to say. "You do not have to say anything," I offered. "Yes, I do," she insisted. "I spent all night thinking about how I have treated you over the years. The things I said to you, about you, the way I dismissed your choices. It was cruel." "It was," I agreed, not sugarcoating the truth. But I allowed it to continue. "Why?" she asked, the single word carrying years of confusion. I took a deep breath, organizing my thoughts. At first, it was because I had nothing to prove. My company was just starting, and success was far from guaranteed. Later, when things took off, I realized something important. If I had to announce my financial success to earn your respect, then that respect would not be worth having. Silence stretched between us for several seconds before she spoke again. Bradford wants to meet with you. Alone. That surprised me. What for? He would not say exactly, she admitted. But I think last night changed how he sees both of us. 3 days later, I met Bradford at a quiet coffee shop in Seattle during a brief return trip. He arrived punctually, dressed more casually than at the dinner, looking somewhat uncomfortable but determined. "Thank you for meeting me," he began after we had both ordered. "I wanted to talk to you without Amanda present." "I gathered that," I replied. "Is everything okay between you two?" He nodded slowly. "Yes, but the dinner was revealing in more ways than one." I saw a side of Amanda I had not seen before. I stayed silent, waiting for him to continue. "The way she treated you," he said carefully, "before she knew about your success. It bothered me. A lot. People show different sides of themselves in different contexts," I offered neutrally. Bradford leaned forward. "That is just it, though. I always thought Amanda valued people for who they are, not what they have. That is what she always told me she believed. But the way she spoke to you about you, and then how quickly that changed when she learned about your company." He trailed off, troubled. "She is still the woman you fell in love with," I reminded him. "I know," he said quickly, "and I still want to marry her. But this has made me think about what values we truly share and what our relationship is built on." We talked for nearly 2 hours. Bradford asked thoughtful questions about my company, my choice to keep my success private, and my perspective on what truly matters in life. By the end, I had gained a newfound respect for the man my sister had chosen. Despite his privileged background, there was a genuineness to him I had not initially recognized. As we parted, he surprised me with a request. "Amanda is struggling with this more than she lets on. Would you be willing to talk with her? Really talk about all the years of hurt between you?" I agreed, though the prospect was daunting. 2 days later, Amanda and I met at our parents' house while they were away on a weekend trip. The familiar setting felt appropriate for the conversation we needed to have. "I do not know where to start," she admitted as we sat across from each other at the kitchen table where we had eaten countless meals growing up. "Maybe with why," I suggested. "Why was it so important to you to see me as less successful than you?" Her eyes filled with tears, something I had rarely seen from my always composed sister. "I built my entire identity around being the successful one, the one who did everything right. Mom and Dad praised me for following their path, for meeting their expectations. It felt good, being the child they were proud of." "They were proud of you," I acknowledged. "They still are. But I needed you to be less," she admitted, her voice breaking. "If you succeeded your way, by breaking all the rules they set, what did that say about my choices? About all the sacrifices I made to follow their plan? I needed your way to be wrong to justify mine being right." It was the most honest she had ever been with me, perhaps with herself. For the first time in years, I saw my sister not as my competitor or critic, but as someone who had created her own prison of expectations. "Our parents called me yesterday," she continued. "Bradford told his parents about your company, and apparently his father mentioned it to Dad. They were shocked and confused about why you never told them." "How did they seem?" I asked, curious about their reaction. "Proud," she said simply, "but also hurt. They want to talk to you." That evening, I called our parents. The conversation was difficult, filled with questions about why I had kept my success secret and apologies from them for not seeing my potential. "We just wanted security for you," Mom explained tearfully. "We never imagined you could find it on such an unconventional path." "I know," I assured her. "You did your best with what you knew." "We are so proud of you, son," Dad said, his voice thick with emotion. Not because of the money, but because you had the courage to follow your conviction when everyone, including us, doubted you. The words I had once longed to hear now felt bittersweet. I appreciated them, but no longer needed them to validate my choices. In the weeks that followed, our family dynamic shifted in subtle but significant ways. Amanda and I began having regular phone calls, awkward at first but gradually more genuine. She asked questions about my company, my life in San Francisco, even my sailing hobby that had surprised her at the dinner. "I never really knew you," she admitted during one call. "I was so busy telling myself and everyone else who you were that I never bothered to find out." Bradford and Amanda's wedding planning continued, but with noticeable changes. The guest list was reduced. The venue changed from the ostentatious hotel they had initially selected to a more intimate location that had special meaning to them both. 6 months after the fateful dinner, I received an unexpected call from a young entrepreneur named Tyler, who reminded me strongly of myself 10 years earlier. He had an innovative idea but little business experience and even less funding. A mutual connection had suggested he reach out to me for advice. Our conversation sparked something in me. I remembered how lost I had felt before meeting Jackson, how his guidance had changed the trajectory of my life. The next day, I established a foundation to provide scholarships and mentorship for young people with ADHD and other learning differences who wanted to pursue entrepreneurship. "Why focus on ADHD specifically?" Amanda asked when I told her about the foundation. "Because that is what I have," I explained. I was diagnosed as an adult, but it explained so much about why traditional education was such a struggle for me. "You have ADHD," she sounded genuinely surprised. "I never knew that." "There is a lot we never knew about each other," I replied. By the time Amanda and Bradford's wedding arrived, nearly a year after the engagement dinner, much had changed. The ceremony was elegant but meaningful, noticeably free from the status symbols that had seemed so important to them before. I sat in the front row beside our parents, feeling a genuine happiness for my sister. At the reception, Amanda hugged me tightly. "Thank you for coming," she whispered. "And thank you for not giving up on me." "We are family," I said simply. "That does not change." Bradford's father approached me during the cocktail hour, predictably eager to discuss business opportunities. But instead of the networking I expected, he surprised me. "I owe you an apology," he said, extending his hand. "The way I judged you at that dinner, based solely on what I thought you had or had not achieved. It was wrong." His unexpected self-awareness caught me off guard. "Thank you for saying that. Amanda tells me you are funding scholarships for kids with learning differences," he continued. "My grandson was recently diagnosed with ADHD. If you ever need additional funding or support for your foundation, I would be honored to contribute." As I flew back to San Francisco after the wedding, I reflected on the journey of the past year. The revelation of my success had changed my family relationships, but not in the ways I might have expected. The truth had not magically fixed everything, but it had created space for honesty, for new understandings to form. My company continued to thrive, but I found my greatest satisfaction in mentoring young entrepreneurs like Tyler, who had launched his startup with my guidance and was already showing promising results. My worth was not in my bank account, but in the impact I could have on others following their own unconventional paths. I still live simply, drive a modest car, and rarely mention my financial success to new acquaintances. But I no longer hide it from the people close to me. I have learned that true authenticity requires neither boasting nor false modesty, just quiet confidence in the path I have chosen. The most valuable lesson from this journey was not about money or success, but about how we measure our own worth and the worth of others. For too long, Amanda measured herself by external validation and achievements. I had reacted by rejecting those measures entirely, sometimes to my own detriment. The truth, as always, lay somewhere in between. Our worth is not determined by our bank accounts, job titles, or the approval of others. Nor is it diminished by our struggles or enhanced by our triumphs. It exists independently of all external measures, constant and unchangeable. Learning to recognize that truth in myself allowed me to finally find peace, regardless of what anyone else thought of my choices. So what about you? Have you ever felt judged for taking an unconventional path? Or perhaps you have been the one doing the judging, only to discover you were missing the full picture. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Hit that like button if this story resonated with you, and subscribe for more real-life experiences that remind us all that success has many definitions. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, the only validation that truly matters is the one you give yourself.